Good morning. I'm Father X. Today we'll talk about practical tips for your child custody mediation. Every mediation is unique, but I'll share my experience to help you learn from it. Later, I'll reveal some behind-the-scenes confidential discussions with my lawyer and the mediator. And at the end of this episode, I'll tell you the story about my 4 aces. In episode 8A, we talked about specific terms to use in a child custody agreement. In this episode, 8B, we'll talk about practical considerations to think about because there are multiple parties involved: you, your ex-wife, your child, and the mediator. For context, our first day in court was July of year 1. In year 2, between July and November, the mother and I met with a mediator. That failed, and we went to trial for 2 years. Then the court granted me primary custody. Let's get to it. Who are the mediators? They can be lawyers, psychologists, or anybody trained in mediating settlements. I think it's better to find a private mediator instead of a mediator that's regularly associated with the courts. Family courts culture is incompetent because they assume custody goes to the mother and the dad should be an alternate weekend parent that pays child support. You don't want your mediator to be a person infected by this toxic culture. Also, you don't want your own family lawyer to negotiate a settlement because they're usually terrible at problem solving, and they might be more interested in keeping the court conflict going to get more billable hours. In my case, we got a private mediator who is a child psychologist and familiar with child development. Child psychologists help children resolve the psychological problems caused by family court's bad parenting decisions. Given the likely psychological harm to our son if his mother became the primary custodial parent, I hoped this psychologist could help design a parenting plan to prevent that. Mediation basics. First, mediation can take several sessions to resolve the many issues. Be patient. Second, the mediator will meet each parent separately and together. Meet with him one-on-one to discuss your goals so you can speak freely without the mother interrupting you. That goes both ways. Third, you can mediate at any point during the trial process. You can present a settlement to the judge for him to sign off on at any point before that judge makes a final decision. Fourth, it's essential to have your own private advisor throughout mediation, behind the scenes, to help you think about your goals and talk to you about the pros and cons of various terms. It can be a friend or a relative. I recommend you keep your lawyer out of most of the mediation discussion because they're too expensive and often don't add value. But keep your lawyer in the loop periodically, especially before signing a final agreement, in case they have any useful advice. Fifth, mediation takes time and energy. If you're also preparing for trial, then it's hard to do both. If the other parent suddenly wants to mediate right before you present your case in court, it might be a tactic to distract you from fully preparing your case. Fully preparing your testimony and evidence is crucial because you only get one shot at it. Don't waste your time, your limited time, on mediation that might fail. Sixth, you should both agree in writing at the beginning of mediation that anything said or emailed regarding mediation is confidential and can't be repeated in court. Confidentiality is standard practice because it encourages open communication. Seventh, she might still try to repeat your statements outside of mediation. Therefore, don't make statements that make you look bad, such as, "I only want sole custody to hurt you or to avoid paying child support." Even though she isn't allowed to repeat this, if she says it to Child Protective Services, the guardian ad litem, or the forensic psychologist, then it'll make you look bad. Also, if you're in court and the mother begins a sentence like, "In mediation, my ex-husband said," then you have to immediately announce, I object. She's about to repeat confidential statements made in mediation." Don't wait for your lawyer to say it. This is a time in court where you have to interrupt the other side from speaking, because if she finishes that sentence, the damage is done. And any judge should take your side and tell her to stop speaking. For negotiating strategy, I recommend a book called Getting to Yes: Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. Negotiating strategy involves problem solving instead of trying to take everything from the other side. This book helps you think about negotiating smarter without getting steamrolled. So let's talk about everybody's mindset and goals in a mediation. The mediator's goal is to guide both parents towards an agreement outside of court. He has no vested interest in the terms of the parenting plan, or whether the settlement is actually in the best interests of the child. The mediator won't decide which parent was right or wrong. They can't decide the outcome for you, but they'll push both sides to communicate and give up on some things to get to some common ground. This is all standard practice. Some mothers have a goal of a 50-50 parenting plan, while others want primary or sole custody. Some mothers will treat the father fairly, while others want revenge on the father and will use the children to hurt the dad. Some mothers have a primary goal of receiving child support, while others don't want money. Figure out what the mother of your child is trying to accomplish. In my case, the mother's goal was to end up with over 50% custody and then receive child support. If the mother gave me primary custody in a settlement, she would be giving up her child support. But the mother never explained why it was better for our son if she was his primary custodial parent. Also, the mother was paying lawyers with her savings and by borrowing money. She wanted to settle so she could stop paying lawyers' fees. Finally, I think my son's mother believed social expectations required the mom to be the primary custodial parent. If she didn't get primary custody, it would be humiliating for her. I think that was also a barrier to her giving me primary custody in mediation. Consider whether this applies in your situation and address it accordingly. What was my goal? Up until this point, the temporary orders gave me custody 4 out of every 14 nights. However, my goal was to have my son live with me 12 out of 14 nights, or about 24 out of every 28 nights. Why? Living together, I protected our infant son from his mother's anger and violent outbursts, including times when she lost control and wielded a large kitchen knife. And she had a history of this behavior with others, not just with me. I couldn't let our son grow up in that environment. When our son cried, I was the one that soothed him because his mother was often wrapped up in her emotional chaos. I was our son's security blanket. That was my role in our home. I wasn't playing along with the incompetent decisions of our judge. I was anchored in the position that it was best for our son if he lived with me for about 24 out of every 28 days, with a mother being required to undergo psychiatric treatment. Now that you see the goals of the mediator, the mother, and the father, let's talk about how this played out. At our first mediation session, the mother started by saying, "Right now, the judge gives you custody 8 out of every 28 days. I'll give you 10 out of every 28 days to give you more time with your son immediately. You don't have to wait another year for a trial. And we know that the court is going to give me custody anyway." The mother's opening comment revealed how broken the family court system was, and she was taking advantage of it. If you've seen my other videos, you know my judge always favored the mother. We both knew the judge was going to give her what she wanted, so she had the negotiating leverage. But I wasn't interested in playing that game. I thought her opening position was obnoxious. I responded with, "I understand. Here's my starting point. You were the violent one in our home, and we're battling for custody because you're too violent for me to live with. You lied to the police and the court pretending you're the victim, but we both know you're the violent one. I propose that I have primary custody for 24 out of 28 days because that's best for our son." Of course, she hated my response and ignored it. From our starting points, we negotiated towards the middle over a few sessions. The mediator told us it's in the best interest of the child to have 50-50 custody. He was trying to get us to the middle. The mother proposed 11 days for me. I told her that if she believed it was fair for one parent to have 11 days and the other one 17 days, then I volunteered to be the parent with 17 days. But she ignored that and offered me 12 days. I continued to say no. Realizing she wouldn't agree to become the non-custodial parent, I offered her 14 days in mediation as the best compromise. I proposed the middle point instead of going back and forth. My son's mother then took my 14-day offer and said, "I offered 12 days and you offered 14 days, so let's split the difference and you can have 13 days. I told her that I offered 14 days as the obvious middle point, not so that she could then average it out with her lower offer and have me end up as the parent with less time. The mediator told us that parenting time doesn't have to be exactly 50-50 because a child wouldn't know the difference between 53% versus 47%. But I felt that still didn't work in my situation. The mother limited her best offer to 13 days to maintain her majority custody because she was getting $16,000 a year in child support, even though it cost about $3,000 a year to care for our infant son. She wanted to keep the profits given to her by our family courts. And that dysfunction created by family court makes mediating a good parenting plan much harder. I told them I would go back and consider 13 days versus 15 days and see how we could balance this with holiday time, because that extra 2 days adds up to an extra 26 days of our son being in her care. Then, during a one-on-one meeting with the mediator, he warned me that family court might give me alternate weekend custody, leaving me with only 6 days out of every 28. He said family court was biased against dads and pressured me to agree to 13 days. Despite this, I stood my ground and said no. I was still anchored in the idea that it was best for our son to live with me for about 24 days every 4 weeks, not 13 or 15. Even though everybody ignored me, I held on to that idea because I was right and they were all wrong. However, we still couldn't even agree on the holiday schedules to get us closer to a 50-50 parenting plan. So mediation failed, but there was another major reason why it failed. During mediation, it was the first time my ex and I had any real conversation since our separation a year ago. With the mediator present, I told the mother she only has temporary custody because she lied to the police to have me falsely arrested. I told her it was disgusting that she would lie to the police to have me arrested, and that was a problem we needed to solve in mediation. What was her response? She snapped at me, saying, "That's in the past. You have to move on and forget about that." She lectured me like I was required to forget about what she did to me. To her, it was perfectly fine that I had to spend a night in jail and face criminal charges because of her lie. Her response disgusted me and turned my stomach for months. She was still the person I left a year ago, the same person. She had no remorse for her criminal actions and used them as leverage for a better custody position. I was disgusted with her, and I realized I couldn't allow this morally bankrupt person to raise our child, even for half his life. Mediation revealed her true colors once again. Getting back to your negotiations, think about your BATNA. That's your best alternative to negotiated agreement. If you don't agree on a settlement, then what's your next best alternative? If we didn't settle, the mother's alternative was to proceed with a trial where the judge favored her constantly. She had a good alternative and didn't have to settle. My best alternative was terrible, going to trial with a hostile judge that favored the mother. My alternative was to move mountains to have the court completely reverse custody in my favor. When the mother offered me 13 out of 28 days, less than 50% custody, I shared that with my lawyer. He advised me that I should probably accept that proposal because the judge wasn't going to give me primary custody. My lawyer advised me this way because he also recognized that, for the past year, the judge was giving the mother everything she wanted, while ignoring everything my lawyer and I said in court. I was at a crossroads and had to make a decision. I told my lawyer, no, I can't accept a settlement where she's the one primarily raising our son. We're going to trial, and I guarantee you victory, and I'll end up with primary custody of our son. You don't have to believe me, but I need you to be there by my side. I'll carry both of us to victory and carry you on my shoulders if I have to. Why did I guarantee victory? Because I had a secret weapon. I was the only person that could reveal the intimate details of what happened in our home, in the real world, before court. I knew my testimony could overcome the judge's incompetence and bias, so she'd have to give me primary custody based on the best interest factors. I also believed that if the judge didn't do so, then I could win on appeal with an appellate court that wasn't gender biased like my trial judge. After I met my lawyer, I had a one-on-one meeting with the mediator. I told him I was rejecting the mother's final offer because it was better for our son if the mother was an alternate weekend parent 4 or 5 days a month. He pushed me to accept the settlement. He said, "You're handling this mediation as if you're playing poker. You're pretending you have a full house, but you only have a pair of twos. But I still said no. Mediation ended. We went to trial. And I was awarded primary custody for 18 out of 28 days. After I got custody, I called the mediator and said, "Hey, remember me? You told me I was playing poker and acting as if I had a full house, but I only had a pair of twos." Well, you were partly correct. I didn't have a full house. I had 4 aces and a wild card. I won the custody trial and now have primary custody of our son. Thank you. Goodbye. Remember, each situation is unique, but it's crucial to stand firm in your beliefs and seek the best outcome for your child's well-being. If you don't, it's likely that nobody else will either. These might be the darkest days of your life. They were for me. I'm making these educational videos to help you navigate this nightmare. If you subscribe, you can get updates when I post more videos. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends who are in a similar situation. If you like, subscribe, and share, it'll help get this message out to more fathers. Please support this channel so I can make more videos. You can donate via my YouTube channel's About page using PayPal or Venmo.